Hey there, gang. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging in here with me. Today I'd like to make a new bridge for this, and I'd also like to do some work on the interior bracing. As I mentioned in the initial video, this being a ladder brace guitar, we've got two cross braces that go above and below the sound hole, and there's no sound hole reinforcement between them. So imagine these aren't exactly to the right size, but they're in approximately the right location. Most acoustic flat tops will have a brace. It can either be wide and low or quite tall and narrow that goes on either side of the sound hole here. Harmony guitars of this period don't have those. It's completely flat in there. And I've repaired a number of these in the past where there's been quite a lot of deformation that occurs. When a guitar tries to fold up over time, this is sort of a weak area, and there's a lot of real estate there that can do funny things, twisting and bending and dipping down. So I'd like to add some sound hole reinforcement. I have to be mindful though that I'm going to be putting in a pickup system that has volume and tone control that will go on the inside of the soundboard right about here. So I have to either make allowances for that by setting this brace back farther away, or I can put it where I normally would, which is about 1/4 of an inch, 6 millimeters away from the sound hole, and then maybe notch out around that to give some place for this to sit. So we'll start off with that. I'll get some spruce. Have a quick look on the inside here. You can see the bridge plate and a series of braces. You can also see the characteristic squeeze out that you'll find in almost every Harmony guitar. It's really brown, really dirty looking glue, and they put a whole lot of it on there. I guess the idea was to slap on as much as possible so it would hold heat and stay liquid while they put the clamps on. Okay, I've got a soundboard offcut here of European spruce, which I know makes very good braces. And I'm going to plane one edge flat. And this is a shooting board, just holds my hand plane at right angles to the surface I want to plane. And yeah, someone asked me about my hand planes. I don't use a whole lot of them. This is a number 4.5 Veritas. I used to work for Lee Valley, which is the parent company of Veritas, so most of my hand planes are Veritas brand, and they're fine. This is a 5 1/4. It's a junior jack plane, which is a good size for working on guitars. It's about 1 foot long. I have a 4.5 smoother, which is quite heavy, slightly wider, and good for making finishing cuts. I use it for everything though. And then of course I have a block plane, which is a low angle block plane. I have a few others that I pull out from time to time, but those are the ones I use most often. So I want to straighten one edge of this. Now just looking here, the grain is straight, but it wanders in and out a little bit, and I want to kind of follow one single grain line if I can. So I got to plane a bit of an angle on this. So having the plane sole be as long or longer than the piece you're planing really helps in keeping the line that you're cutting straight. If I wanted to check that, I could use a rule, but I'm reasonably competent in my ability to plane this straight without looking. So after that, now I'm going to grab this marking gauge here, and I'm going to want these to be about 25 millimeters, 1 inch, thereabouts, wide. So registering against that flat surface I've already made, I'll score a line. There we go. While I have the shooting boards out, I'm also going to plane stock for the interior braces, which I'm going to be fitting in between the ladder farther down the soundboard. It's a heavy cut. lighten up a little bit. And these I'm going to take to about 5/16 or 8 millimeters. The brace stock is going to be about 3/8 of an inch in height, and I can plane it down from there. Yes, I could use a bandsaw, but that means I'd have to travel all the way upstairs, go out to my backyard, open up my shed, turn on the bandsaw, cut this thing, and then come back again. This is actually quicker for me. Okay, we'll save those for later. So how are we going to figure out the distance between those two braces there? Getting in with a ruler would be both very frustrating and pretty inaccurate. So I've got a couple of pieces of wood here. There was actually a bamboo coffee stirrer. And I'm going to butt the end up against each of the braces. Hold them in a straight line. I'll make a mark where they overlap. I can take these out, put them back in the same configuration, and get a measurement. Okay, after some fitting, those fit very well. So I'm going to put a light beveling on the top. I've marked the underside. This is actually the side that will be glued to the top itself, so I'm going to be putting the bevels on the opposite. The reason for this, I just don't like having right angles inside the guitar anywhere. I want a chamfer or a rounded edge somehow. Now I'm going to mark for the cutout. Okay, these are cut and planed. I've also made some interior clamping cauls that will fit over top of these, and some for the exterior as well. Anytime you're going to be gluing something to the underside of an old soundboard like this, you have to clean it. That's not just dirt. There's atmospheric oils and stuff that can build up. After I'm done with this is just a little bit of naphtha. I will lightly sand the area as well with some 220 grit sandpaper and clean it again. If you don't do this, braces just have a tendency to fall right off. While those are clamped up and drying, I'll work on the bridge. I've got a piece of Chechen wood here which I'll be making the bridge from. And I think I'll make it 1 millimeter longer and 1 millimeter wider, just to cover up any rough stuff that's going on the top from the previous installation. I'm just measuring the old bridge. It's around 5/16 of an inch. Just under 8 millimeters. It's deceptive actually, because the back end of this bridge is actually quite a bit taller. Before we get too far along in the process, I like to mark the side that's the bottom and also which is forward. Use a little awl here. I also have a little pencil arrow. Just in case this gets rubbed off, I have the mark. So this is our top, this is the front. Just making a rough mock-up here of the underside of the top so you'll have some understanding of what I'm aiming for in terms of augmenting the bracing. Harmony guitars, they have a flat top, which is kind of unusual. Most modern guitars have either an arch to them or they're built in a spherical radius dish, so they have a circular domed effect. This adds structural rigidity and it can prevent some deformation. It varies from maker to maker. I think Martin uses a 40-foot radius or thereabouts. Some other people get quite extreme with the amount of dome that they put in the top. Harmonies, though, are flat, and they can suffer a couple of things because of that. You've got the rotational force of the strings pulling on the bridge, which will naturally pull up the backside of the top here. You'll develop a hump, and it can also push down the area in front of the bridge, and it will start to dip. In this case, with ladder bracing, you've got this nice big wide open space here that it can act like a fold zone, and It's not so bad on this guitar. I've said this before, but some of the spruce guitars can get a really disastrous dip there. So I want to prevent that from happening, and I think there can be some tonal benefits from putting braces on the top that cross the grain at an angle. In this case, having a small brace that angles between these two cross members should do a lot to strengthen things up and transfer that rotational force from the bridge forward between these two braces here and keep that thing from collapsing. I was just looking at the angle back here where the bridge pad ends. I could, if I want, extend that past and make another brace behind that. I'm going to feel this thing before I do that. I'm going to do this one first. If it needs more support, we can do this one. To really strengthen things up, I would probably cut notches in the horizontal braces and also the angled brace, notch them into each other. That would be a very rigid top. I don't think we need that. This is a mahogany top. It's a hardwood. You know, it's got enough integrity and strength that we don't want to stiffen it up too much because then we'd lose volume. There we go. This gives me enough of a flat spot on the top that I can sit my clamps on there and they'll have something to register against. But I've removed some of the excess mass from the sides of the brace. I'm using magnets through the top to mark out where the braces are, the inside edges of the braces. And using that information I can cut the angles on these so that they will mate up with the braces in a straight line. Just going to hold it in place there for a minute to allow the glue to seize, and then I can get a clamp on it. I'm just starting to do the layout here for the bridge. Checking out the original, it had a through saddle slot, which is very nice, very vintage looking, and I'd be tempted to replicate that, except I have to remember that I'm using a dual source pickup system that involves an under saddle piezo element to it. So, I mean, there are ways of doing this. It tends to look a bit clunky when you're done, because if you turn the bridge to the side, it always looks like the saddle isn't fully seated in its slot, so it's a kind of a cheesy solution. I don't really like that. So I think my best bet is probably to replicate a late 50s Gibson bridge from an LG series guitar. There was a period there before they went to the big honkin' adjustable bridges where they just had a simple blind saddle slot, and that'll do well. Ordinarily, of course, I would just lay out my pinholes and start drilling, but I have to remember that on this guitar, the center line of the bridge probably doesn't match the center line of the top, and I want to keep the same footprint. I don't really want to move the bridge around too much. So I should probably lay that out with this on the guitar. I've got some dental floss taped into position here at the nut at the correct spacing, and I'm just checking out the run of the strings relative to the edge of the fingerboard here. I think those efforts we took to shift the center line of the neck over laterally while we were doing the neck reset have really paid off, because the spacing at the bridge here is pretty symmetrical now. I like about 3 millimeters, 1/8 of an inch away from the outside edge of the fingerboard. And on this guitar, it's got a fairly wide nut. It's 1 3/4, which is about 44 millimeters. That'll give us a saddle spacing of about 57, 58 millimeters, which is around 2 5/16. So that's a good finger picking setup. So we're in good shape. I'm drilling the 3/16 inch pilot holes here, not going all the way through the bridge. I'll finish them off when it's glued to the guitar. I'm planing off some of the excess material on the wing area of the bridge, then sanding a gentle radius on the top. And I'll use a plane to gently blend those surfaces together. so it's one continuous curve. I'll finish sanding that off. And then I can sand the scooped area on the ends of the bridge using the oscillating spindle sander. Harmony wasn't too fastidious about getting rid of the sanding scratches from that operation, so I can be a little bit loose and just clean things up a little bit here. Plastic packing tape to protect the bottom of the bridge while I apply a coat of oil. Putting a coat of Danish oil on things here. Actually, I made a mistake. I probably shouldn't have put oil on the top here because I'm going to want to stick some tape on that when I plot out the position for the saddle, but oh well. I'll make it work. Okay, those braces in there look something like this at the moment, but I want to go in and pare down the ends slightly. To create a little ramp at the ends. To do that, I've got a little knife which I made. It's got a curved edge and it fits in the palm and it's very small. It's also got this interesting hooked thing. This is from a Warren carving set, and it's got this thing that I can kind of get my finger in there, so I'm less in danger of getting myself cut, but it also lets me guide the edge pretty precisely when I'm, you know, off down in the sound hole somewhere. So I'm going to try to knock some of the corners off, that's all. This requires some contortion. Sometimes it pays to be ambidextrous. Here's a picture of it installed and cleaned up. You can scraping and sanding off any old glue or finish. This is a trick I learned from Evan Gluck, New York City guitar repair. He started putting a piece of self-adhesive sandpaper down on the footprint of the bridge and using the top as a template. On new guitars, I'll usually just sort of scrape the bottom of the bridge slightly concave, like tenths of a millimeter, so that I know that it's going to contact all the way around the outside perimeter and get squished down by the clamps. And I've never had a problem with that. But on these old tops that are kind of warped, it's nice to use them as a sanding form. So I'll give myself some sanding scratches, figure out where I need to remove wood, if anywhere, and then scrape it off and then go back again until I get a really good fit. Well, I think that's enough for today. Appreciate all the nice comments you guys are leaving. Thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully have another one of these up for you tomorrow or the day after.